Recently, whether I'm talking to friends or watching one of my favorite shows, Love is Blind, I can't help but notice how much everything is starting to sound like therapy speak.
For me, I think I feed really hard off like people's energy. I would kind of maybe consider myself like an empath.
Gaslighting, trauma, OCD, toxic boundaries, emotionally dumping. These words used to occupy professional mental health settings, but now they've been dropped into the mainstream and have lost much of their meaning. This specific form of semantic expansion of psychological terms was dubbed concept creep by scholar Nick Haslam in 2016 to describe the way therapeutic ideas broadened to the point of losing meaning. Now, we've long been in denial about the complex issues surrounding mental health, especially the importance of and need for therapy. But in 2023, it feels like societally, we maybe went a little too far, and many well-meaning conversations now risk devolving into therapy gibberish. So how did mental health go from something people wouldn't discuss in public to something people won't shut up about? Let's find out in this Wisecrack Edition, Is Therapy Speak Making Us Nuts? But first, I wanted to tell you about something that's way cheaper than therapy, our Patreon. Now, it won't help you deal with childhood trauma or anything, but it's a way you can directly support our channel and get a lot of extra content along the way. If you sign up for our Patreon, you get all of our videos early with no ads. You get to jump on our Discord server. We have extra audio content, and we have a level where you get an extra video every month where I answer your questions about philosophy and other stuff. It's a very fun time. You get a lot of good stuff out of it, and it's the best way to support us directly if you like what we're doing, so consider checking it out. There's a link in the description. Therapy's a relatively new practice, so let's talk about how we got from diagnosing someone with demonic possession to treating depression with CBT, aka cognitive behavioral therapy. At the end of the 19th century, Dr. Sigmund "This gun is a penis" Freud discovered that certain ailments could be treated by talking about them instead of fixing them with medical treatments. He hypothesized that we all have a subconscious where unacceptable thoughts, memories, and motives hang out, unbeknownst to the conscious mind. You know, like thinking that your mom is hot.
This is your dad.
Mom, you're gotta be joking.
Or irrationally hating your first grade teacher, Mr. Casey. The idea of the subconscious birthed the field of psychoanalysis. Now, Freud developed a set of theories and therapeutic techniques that dealt with the unconscious mind, including talk therapy. Then, in the 1950s, Freud's nephew, Edward Bernays, lit up Madison Avenue with his own spin on psychoanalysis. Bernays believed that human psychology could be used to drive consumer behavior, and proved it with legendary ad campaigns, like when he encouraged women to smoke by branding cigarettes as feminist torches of freedom. Now, if you're thinking about Don Draper in Mad Men, yes, it's basically like that.
Everybody else's tobacco is poisonous. Lucky Strikes is toasted.
The success of Bernays' campaigns shifted marketing firms' openness to using psychoanalysis as a tool to shape or manipulate buyer behavior. Finally, we had a financial incentive to understand the human brain. Fast forward to the 1970s, and the field of psychology and the techniques of psychoanalysis took off with the coming-of-age boomers. Overall, the 1970s saw an increase in emphasis on the self. I mean, the boomers weren't called the me generation for nothing. You see, by the summer of 1971, much of the psychedelia and political activism associated with the 60s counterculture had dissolved, leaving young people without a source of meaning. If you want to know more about psychedelic 60s culture, we have some recent videos on that. You can check them out. They responded by turning the 60s ethos inward via things like jogging, health food, and yes, psychoanalysis, coinciding with what's called the refinement period of psychology. Then in the 80s, Oprah imbued entertainment with a therapeutic ethos in her self-help oriented talk show. While Oprah normalized therapy vibes, she also popularized the formerly religious idea that suffering happens for a reason. Dr. Phil, who started as a resident psychology expert on Oprah, continued her tradition with hyper-dramatized pseudo-therapy sessions. In the 90s, the trend continued with self-help books. Between 1991 and 1996, self-help book sales went up 96%. People wanted to become better by fixing themselves, and titles like The Power of Now, The Four Agreements, and The Art of Happiness became household favorites. Narrative television also caught the therapy bug, and eventually, even mob bosses got therapists.
Any thoughts at all on why you blacked out?
I don't know. Stress, maybe.
Now, cut to 2023, and therapy is everywhere. including our daily conversations via therapy speak. So what's driving this fixation? Well, let's backtrack to understand why we needed therapy in the first place. Because long before you laid on a couch and told a stranger your deepest insecurities, people all went to one big therapist in the sky, named God. Or if you're a good Catholic like me, you went to his administrative assistant, the priest, who you'd confess to inside a small wooden box, and you definitely wouldn't lie about how you did hand stuff after prom. You know, you wouldn't lie about that. You would just look an old Irish man in the eyes and say, I did hands over pants stuff consensually after listening to an R. Kelly song at a dance. He wasn't canceled then, by the way. It was 2002, 2003. We didn't know R. Kelly was bad, so don't taint my moment, okay? But over the course of the 19th century, society became increasingly secularized, and religion began to fill a less important role. Without a higher purpose or the carrot of heaven, life and a meaningless death felt, well, sad, soul-crushing, honestly scary as which led people to existential dread. 20th century society tried to fill the hole of religion, but the confessional element was still missing. People had nowhere to put their guilt, their fear, and their need for redemption. But then Freud came along and argued that we can live without God by reframing our anxiety and neurosis over culture and civilization as a psychological struggle within the self. This encouraged people to switch from stressing out over what was going on out there to focusing on what was going on in here. So worry less about a nuclear holocaust and worry more about why your dad didn't make it to any of your Little League games. Our culture simultaneously shifted to revolve more around the individual than larger societal forces, and morality transitioned from being about the collective to being about the self. People turned to therapy for things previously offered by religion. Therapy replaced confessionals as spaces to alleviate guilt and to reflect on existence. Self-affirming mantras replaced prayers, communities with the same diagnosis replaced church groups, and self-actualization replaced salvation. Now, to be fair, none of this is inherently good or bad. This cultural transformation was rooted in a genuine desire for self-understanding, which is healthy. The only problem is, with everyone turning inwards, we sort of lost our ability to think and act collectively. This is one reason why solving, say, the climate crisis feels impossible. Now, religion has many flaws, but what it does have is the power to make people believe in something bigger than themselves, and thus to make sacrifices for the greater good. In short, therapeutic culture reinforces individualism, whereas church reinforces communalism. Again, this isn't bad, except that another thing was happening to exacerbate all of this. Our good friend, neoliberalism. While we talked about this a lot in previous videos, we're just going to focus on one particular aspect today: the emphasis on the self and on individual responsibility. In regards to mental health, this thinking often takes the form of the question, are you doing the work? Neoliberalism helped foster the idea that instead of changing the world, what we really need to do is look inward and change ourselves. The upside of this is that many of us get better through therapy. The downside is it can lead us to ignore the societal factors that contribute to the systemic problem of mental illness. Stuff like, I don't know, there's a climate crisis, and there's war, there's social media, growing income inequality, everything's really expensive, are we ever going to afford to retire? You know, stuff like that. Instead, today, we focus on symptoms like anxiety and depression, and then just try to solve those instead. It makes sense that in a world that feels increasingly out of control, our defense mechanism is to turn to the only thing we can control, our mindset. While therapy is unquestionably healing and beneficial for many, a therapy practice disconnected from social and political change has a limit. There's only so much we and our therapists can do on our own. For example, in education, instead of addressing the pedagogical trends of recent years and the increased emphasis on self-control in the classroom, young boys in particular are diagnosed with ADHD and prescribed medication. In a sense, mental health has become a great smokescreen for the ills of neoliberalism. When Western societies are more depressed than ever, the cause can't just be you failing to reconcile with your dad because you won't use words like boundaries and self-talk. Again, we cannot overstate how helpful and life-changing therapy can be. But sadly, it's also one of the few tools we have for coping with feelings of futility in an increasingly chaotic world. This is how we got from never talking about our feelings to talking about them constantly via therapy speak. The contemporary rise of therapy speak has been great in that it's encouraged people to articulate their feelings and handle their shit. Unfortunately, it's also led us to broadly using therapy terms incorrectly because, well, we're not all trained therapists. At the same time, even though the language of therapy has become more inclusive, the actual institutional structures around mental health remain exclusive and expensive, especially right here in the good old US of A. So it's like we're given a sneak preview of all the self-actualizations we could achieve if the structures needed to embody and practice that language weren't hidden behind a paywall. Because society as a whole, in America at least, won't provide the support we need. And in the absence of widespread access to therapy, we have a simultaneous proliferation of TikTok videos, which often stereotype, oversimplify, or misunderstand very real mental health disorders. At the same time, content creators are incentivized and encouraged to pathologize their issues to please the algorithm, with some even faking disorders for clout, a phenomenon so real it's been dubbed illness appropriation. But at this point, mental health hasn't just been co-opted by influencers. It's become its own industrial complex. If you, like me, have ever posted about dealing with anxiety, depression, or ADHD, then chances are you've encountered the marketing of therapeutic products ranging from expensive notebooks that help you with time management to essential oils that calm your anxiety. And while these may work for some people, and if so, that's fantastic, there's something weird about monetizing our vulnerability and our desire to get better. When you're on the receiving end of the commodified therapy industry, your shame and guilt are weaponized to encourage buyer participation, lest you opt out and are left all alone with your sad brain because you don't care enough to do the work. Therapeutic marketing isn't just a guilt machine, though. Sometimes it's just downright sinister. Sponsored videos about mental health related topics on TikTok masquerade as educational, while in fact, if you just lift up their glasses, you'd see that they're advertisements in disguise. Therapy services and psychiatric pharmaceuticals are sold via expensive apps and advertised on TikTok and Instagram. And they especially target Gen Z, the generation that struggles the most with mental health issues. Profiting off people's mental troubles feels like the next logical step of capitalism's appropriation of therapeutic language, which started with Bernays. And it's working. Mental health is a booming industry. Globally, it was worth $383 billion as of 2020, and is predicted to grow to $537 billion by 2030. The global mental disorder drugs market size is predicted to be at $58.9 billion by 2031, and the global mental health apps market is valued at $5.2 billion in 2022 and is only growing. So while therapy speak is positive, and that it's normalized therapy and talking about your struggles, it's also become free subliminal advertising for the mental health industry. Therapy speak points to our desire for self-understanding, but it neglects social contexts that contribute to mental illnesses. Contexts like class, race, gender, sexuality, disability, and so on. It's no coincidence that the happiest countries have the largest social safety nets, and that you're more likely to be depressed in America if you're poor or queer. Plus, most therapy still isn't covered by insurance and remains largely inaccessible for many. And for those who can't access real therapy, watching videos about it on TikTok lands your algorithm in a glut of advertisements for anti-anxiety oil diffusers. There's no question that society is better off now that therapy and therapy speak are far less stigmatized. However, when political leaders point to the mental health crisis, it feels like they're deflecting from the bigger issues that are making many of us depressed or anxious. And as we've said, they're individualizing a societal problem. While we think of the idea of emotional resilience as a matter of individual fortitude, of doing the work, thinkers like psychotherapist Esther Perel discuss something called collective resilience. She explains, resilience is not a bunch of traits in an individual. Resilience is the ability to tap into the collective resources. If everybody goes at it alone, we'll be avoidant and depressed. But if we create a thing together and understand how we maintain hope, we will not have a mental health crisis. We will have a world crisis with people that are coping. And maybe one lesson our secularized society can take from old school religion is that coping together is typically more effective than coping alone. But what do you guys think? Is therapy speak helping us be more open about our personal struggles? Does the rise of therapeutic culture risk individualizing society-wide problems, or Should we all just be like our grandparents and shove all the emotions down deep inside where no one can find them? Let us know what you think in the comments. As always, thank you so much to our patrons for all your support. It really does help us out that you support us directly. We hope you enjoy the perks. If you want to join this gang, there is a link in the description. And thank you so much to all of you for taking the time to watch our videos, to like, comment, subscribe, and share. It means a lot, and we really appreciate it, especially those of you that feed the algorithm. In the meantime, stay sane and avoid clicking on ads for weird mental health products, and we'll see you next time.